Shalom. I want to deal with Matthew 2 and 11. It says, and when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold and frankincense and myrrh. So everybody familiar with this? This is dealing with the wise men. There's not three wise men, there's wise men. The Bible never says three wise men. But anyway, they worship Yehoshua or Jesus or Isho or whatever you want to call him. They worshiped him. They prostrated to him. When you look up the word worship in Hebrew, one of those words is shakah, and that's prostrate, to bow down. They worship Jesus. They had no problem with that. It was something that they understood that we don't understand. Uh, let's go to Exodus 34 and 14, because I see why brothers and sisters would teach out of zealousness, and wanting this for righteousness, but I can see why they would teach that we are not to worship Jesus because of verses like this. Exodus 34 and 14, ye shall worship no other God, for the Lord whose name is jealous is a jealous God. So I can see why brothers and sisters hold the doctrine that we are not to worship Jesus. But if we take all of these verses concerning Christ's divinity and the worshiping of Christ in totality, then we can see why it's a different circumstance here as far as worshiping another God. Let's deal with Daniel 7 and 14. It says, and dominion was given to him, and glory, and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. Now that word serve there in the Hebrew is palak, and that deals with worship. That all nations and languages and tongues should worship him. When you read it in the Hebrew, it says, Yehib silatan wekar, Yumalku wikol, Amaya, Yumaya, we lisanaya, Yip lihun. So when we read that in the Hebrew, it's definitely talking about the Messiah and the kingdom that he's given, and that all nations and tongue and languages should worship him. So if we are to interpret Exodus 34 and 14 correctly, we got to interpret it in the light of Daniel 7 and 13, that all nations and languages worship him. And also the other 9 times in the New Testament that Jesus is worshipped, and he never tells people to not worship him. So let's go back to Matthew 14 and 33. Matthew 14 and 33, it says, those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. So they worshipped him. The disciples worshipped him, said, truly you are the Son of God. So if we knew who he really was, if we really knew what a Son of God was, the only begotten Son of God, not only is he just a Son of God, like the angels are sons of God, he's the only begotten. In the Greek, again, that's monogenes. And that's the uniquely begotten Son of God. So if we knew who he was, and we seen his works, and we really believed his works, we would also worship him. Let's go to Matthew 29. Matthew 29, 9 and 10. Because this is just the 9 occurrences where Jesus is worshipped in the Old Testament. Matthew 29, Matthew 28, 9 and 10. Yeah, excuse me. And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, rejoice. So they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Again, they prostrate in the Hebrew as in shakah or pilak in the Hebrew, and they worship him. Matthew 28, 16 and 17. The 11 disciples went into Galilee on the mountain which Jesus had appointed for them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. You see that? They worshipped him, but some doubted. So we need to not be among those who doubt. Let's deal with Luke 24 and 51. Don't be among those who doubt and say, well, we ain't going to worship Christ. Because as we're going to see here in a minute, Lot worshiped the angel, and Abraham worshipped the angel in Genesis 18 and 19. And Joshua worshipped the captain of the Lord's host. So who are we to say we ain't going to worship one that's greater than the angel? Thus says the Holy Bible. Luke 24 and 51. Luke 24, 51. Now it came to pass, while he blessed them, that he was parted from them and carried up into heaven. And they worshipped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy. If I seen somebody ascend into heaven, I'll worship them too. If we knew the magnitude of the significance of his character, we would worship him too. John 9 and 37. Because these are just the different occurrences. This is in the gospel. In order for you to hold the doctrine that Christ cannot be worshipped, you got to do something with these scriptures. You have to acknowledge them. You have to address them. You know what I'm saying? Matthew 9 and 37. And Jesus said unto him, you have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you. Then he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. Another occasion of Yehoshua being worshipped. Let's get Hebrews 1 and 6. Because not only do men worship him, as we're going to see here, that angels worship him. Hebrews 1 and 6. This ain't that hard. This ain't that hard. We just got to rightly divide the word. Hebrews 1 and 6. But when he again brings the firstborn into the world, he says, let all the angels of God worship him. Let all the Hamalakim of Elohim worship him. You know, and that's real simple and that's real clean cut. Revelation 22 and 3. Because what we see also, and I can get it in one of these texts here. What we see also is that that everybody will worship him in the kingdom. This is what Daniel 7 and 14 is talking about. Revelations 22 and 3. Let's get that. This is what Daniel speaks of. Revelations 22. That's going to be the last chapter of the book. This is at the end. Huh? I'm going to get it in this one right here. Revelations 22 and 3. So this is way at the last chapter of the book in Christ's worship. Revelation 22 and 3. It says, no longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and the servants will serve him. So again, we see the word serve even in the Greek. If you read that in the King James Version, it says, and the servants will worship him. So that's just a little more clarification. I'm going to read this right here in the King James 22 and 3. Revelation 22 and 3. And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. So again, that's the same thing that we see when we read Daniel 7 and 14. I'm going to read that again, Daniel 7 and 14. It says, and dominion was given him, and glory and the kingdom, that all peoples, nations, languages should serve him. So that's the same thing we see in the Hebrew, but when we look up the Hebrew word palak, or serve, is dealing with worship him, that all nations should worship him. Make no mistake. Do not make any mistake concerning that. Let's deal with John 5 and 23. Because as we worship the God, we worship the Elohim of Israel, the Elohim that created the heavens and earth. We should also worship the Son in the same way, and that's what he said. John 5 and 23. Let's deal with that. John 5 and 23. John 5 and 23. That all should honor the Son just as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. So you got to honor the Son in the same way you honor the Father, because glory is given him in Daniel 7 and 14. Dominion is given him, and the kingdom is given him. So you have to honor him. If you look up the word palak, it means to reverence or to honor, to worship. So you ain't going to worship the one to whom the kingdom is given? That don't make a whole bunch of sense. Let's get John 10 and 30. John 10 and verse 30. It says, I and my Father are one. That's fairly simple. That's fairly simple. Him and the Father are one. Let's deal with Revelation 22. Revelation 22, 8 and 9. I'm going to get it back here in this apocrypha right here. Revelation 22, 8 and 9. Because we see what happened with John when John tries to worship an angel. Revelation 22 and verse 8. It says, "And I, John, saw these things, and I heard him, and when I had heard and seen, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel which showed me these things. Then said he unto me, See thou do it not, for I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren the prophets, and of them which keep the sayings of this book. Worship God." So the angel tells John, worship Elohim. I'm your fellow brethren. And he said unto me, Seal not the sayings of this prophecy, this book, for the time is at hand. So the angel is telling John, worship the Most High, don't worship me. And also when we look at Revelations 19 and 10, let's get that. Revelations 19 and 10, it says, "And I fell at his feet to worship him, and he said unto me, See thou do it not, I am thy fellow servant of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy." So again, the angel tells him to worship God. And we know that Christ, he says in John 10 and 30, I and the Father are one. And in John 5 and 23, we can go back and kind of read that again. John 5 and 23, he says that all should honor the Son just as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. So if you worship the Father, the angel's telling you to worship the Father, we see that Christ is also worshiped. In Revelation 22 and 3, and Daniel 7 and 14, Matthew 2:11, Matthew 14:33, Matthew 29:8, Matthew 28:9, Matthew 28:16 through 17, John 9:37-38. You know, and verses like this are just looked over and not dealt with. Let's go to Romans 1:25. Romans, I'm gonna get it right here in this New King. I deal with many different versions of the Bible. I'm not King James only. Yeah, excuse me. That's not King James only is not the way to be. I love the King James translation, but that's not the way to be. Let's get Romans 1:25. Romans 1:25. It says, "Who exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever and amen." We don't want to find ourselves worshiping the creature rather than the Creator. And to know for sure that we're not worshiping the creature, but rather we are worshiping the Creator, let's get it in the text. Let's go to John 1. Because if we agree with the New Testament wholeheartedly, which some people don't, they got internal problems, then we know that Christ is the Creator. He was there in the beginning and nothing was created without him. John 1 and 3, "All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men." Verse 10, "He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him." A lot of people don't know the Messiah as the scriptures has said. He is the Creator. Worshiping the Messiah is not considered idolatry. Why? Because he's given dominion. Let's go back and read that again in Daniel 7. Daniel 7 and 14. "And dominion was given him, and glory," this is given by the Father, "and the kingdom that all peoples and nations should serve him." Again, that word serve in the Hebrew is palak, and it's dealing with reverence. We reverence the Most High. So worshiping Yehoshua HaMashiach is not considered idolatry because he is the Creator. And also we see that in the Tanakh, let's get that in Genesis 19, that Abraham worships an angel. Let's just briefly touch on this also, because this is what a lot of people forget when they yell in their ear, "Oh, you can't worship." Yeah, well, you're going to have to explain this too. It's in the Tanakh. Genesis 18, "The Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, and he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground and said, 'My Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant.'" So what Abraham is doing here is considered bowing, is considered worshiping these men, which are Hamalakim, they are angels. Genesis 19. "Now the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face towards the ground." Again, that has to be accounted for. Lot and Abraham are bowing or prostrating or shakah to these angelic beings. Let's deal with it in Joshua. But these are things that are often overlooked, and it's okay, but we have to do better. A lot of people, when they teach these doctrines that we not to worship Christ, they teach it out of, they zealous and they want to keep the law. They want to make sure that they're not worshiping another God. We have to understand Jesus is God. He's the only begotten Son of God, and him and the Father are one. Now, he's not the Father, but him and the Father are one. He said that, and he also said you need to honor him just as you honor the Father. Joshua 5:14. So he said, no, but as the commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshiped and said to him, what does my Lord say to his servant? So again, Joshua falls to his face and worship. These are angelic hosts. So if Joshua can worship these angelic hosts, are we not to worship the one who's greater than the angel? Again, let's get that in Hebrews 1:4. Having become so much better than the angels, as he has by inheritance obtained a much more excellent name than they. So he is greater than the angels. So if Joshua can bow to the Sa'ar of the captain of the Lord's host, if he can bow to the captain of the Lord's host, if Abraham can bow to these three men, if Lot can bow to these two angels at Sodom, are you not going to bow before the Son of Man? Let's get that in Hebrews. Let's get that in Philippians 2. Philippians 2 and 10. Because again, shakah in the Hebrew, just like palak, it deals with the bowing down, the worshiping. So when we read in Philippians 2 and 10 that every knee shall bow, we understand that. Philippians 2 and 10. That at the name of Yehoshua, every knee should bow, those in heaven and those on earth, and of those under the earth. Everybody gonna bow. Those under the earth, those in heaven. Who is it speaking of when it says those in heaven will bow? Again, Hebrews 1:6. When the angels worship Christ. The angels worship Christ. Hebrews 1:6. But when he again brings the firstborn into the world, he says, let all the angels worship him. So every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. So we don't want to just be blatantly teaching people that we are not to worship Jesus, because it's right here in the text. Again, we can read Daniel 7:14 again. And dominion was given him, and glory, and the kingdom, that all peoples, nations, tongues should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion